In Hebron's Old City, on June 4th, 1967, a 7-year-old practices tiny cross-stitches her grandmother taught her. Scissors click against fabric, a metal till clatters. A fan pushes heavy heat through a 3-generation textile shop. Tomorrow, her father will lock the door, slip the key into his jacket, and tell the children to keep walking no matter what they hear. The key still turns. The lock belongs to someone else. That's what vanished in 6 days that June. Not just lines on a map, but embroidery hoops left mid-stitch, exam papers stacked and ready, never marked, wheat that browned in the field because the people who planted it couldn't get back. Around 300,000 Palestinians were displaced in less than a week. Most have never returned. The headlines I grew up with called it the 6-Day War. Many Palestinians call it the Naksa, a setback. Both names matter. One is the official label, the other is how it felt to the people who lived it. If you've never heard of the Naksa, you're not alone. Most classes skip it. If you grew up hearing about it, you've probably never seen the paperwork. Systems, legal, political, human, is how we certify truth. Prottayon. Note, the human scenes I use are composites drawn from documented testimonies and archives, stand in for recurring verified patterns. Events themselves are established history. Put the scaffold in place. May 1967, after months of border clashes and high-volume threats, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser asks the UN to pull its peacekeepers out of Sinai.
Similarly, after Suez, the chain of events continued up to that threat against Syria, which sparked the current crisis. That is the root of the problem. I am ready to answer your questions.
And the request is granted. Troops move in, then closes the Straits of Tiran, Israel's only sea route south, ships through, no trade route, calls it an act of war. Pacts tighten. Egypt and Jordan formalize theirs, Syria is already aligned. Maps and in speeches, catastrophe looks imminent. The ground, the reality is cruder. Elites playing chess, civilians used as terrain. If you're watching from outside the Middle East or the West, here's the context. 1967 reshaped the region, the way partition reshaped South Asia. Borders drawn, people displaced, consequences still unfolding. Dawn, June 5. Israeli jets skim the Mediterranean to stay below radar and rise over Egypt's coast. Operation Focus starts at 07:45. Runways are cratered first so planes can't take off. Waves of strikes follow on a tight clock. By late morning, at least 19 Egyptian airfields are disabled, and more than 250 aircraft are destroyed or damaged, most on the ground. The sky belongs to Israel. The ground sounds the same city after city. Not a jet, but waves of them. Windows shiver. Sirens catch up. Families do what families always do under sudden danger. Grab documents, children, keys, and head for any road that still looks open. To the south, Egyptian formations break across Sinai. To the east, people crowd the bridges over the Jordan River. Within days, relief agencies are counting displacement in the hundreds of thousands. June 7th, East Jerusalem falls. That night, in the Maghrabi quarter beside the Western Wall, bulldozers clear roughly 130 homes. About 650 residents are pushed out in one operation to make space for a new plaza. Farther north, on the Golan Heights, most Syrian villages empty under fire. Druze towns like Maid el-Shams largely remain. A fault line opens between those told to stay and those forced to go. By June 10, Israel controls East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights. The fight lasts less than a week. The occupation lasts decades. Hold 3 moments from June 7. They're not random, they're the blueprint. You'll see this loop again. Temporary, then legal, then permanent. Hebron, loudspeakers, first Hebrew, then Arabic. Evacuate for security, temporary. At the Allenby Bridge, the family becomes paperwork. Names on a manifest, bodies in a queue. Days later, their home is classified abandoned. The key still turns. The registry says otherwise. The Golan, soldiers shout orders. Some towns are told to remain while others are cleared. Years later, those who stayed describe the relief of waking in their own beds and the guilt of watching neighbours vanish. The policy word is security. The effect is fracture inside a single community, and a precedent because 1967 didn't invent the playbook. In 1951, the Israeli Supreme Court rules that the Christian villagers of Ikrit, expelled in 1948, have the right to return. On Christmas Day that year, the army demolishes the village. The church is left standing. Even when law says return, erasure can make return impossible. That's the loop. Temporary evacuation, legal reclassification, demolition or seizure, permanent displacement. It repeats across that week, and in the years that follow. None of this settles who feared whom on June 5th. Fear was real. The point is, who paid the bill on the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and who is still paying it now? Here's the thesis in plain language. The war didn't only change borders, it set up a legal administrative machine that turned emergency into policy, policy into architecture, and architecture into everyday life, where leaving for safety could mean losing your home in the paperwork. British mandate rules supplied legal scaffolding. Great power cover softened the blowback. Arab regimes chased their own interests. Inside Israel, a religious national project translated scripture into survey lines. None of it was automatic. People designed it and left receipts. We're going to read the paper trail, drafts, orders, court rulings, by name and date. We're also going to keep the rooms ventilated, the embroidery hoop, the exam papers, the spring in Imwas. Truth, it isn't just what happened, it's who was there when it did. If anyone says this is too messy to follow, you just did. Now, let's open the files. May 28, 1967, a cabinet room in Jerusalem. Ministers arrive for what the press release calls security discussions. But in files opened decades later, one line stops you cold. Menachem Begin, former underground fighter, future prime minister, calls it a historic moment to realize the land of Israel in its entirety. The war hasn't started. Egyptian tanks are still 200 kilometers away in Sinai, but the territorial vision is already on the table, spoken aloud with maps. We just looked at what vanished, now who prepped the eraser, and how a 6-day war was assembled months in advance, piece by piece. After Suez in 1956, when Britain, France and Israel tried to seize Egypt's canal and were forced out, everyone took notes. No one came out virtuous, but each side learned the game. Washington's note, don't let Europe run the Middle East. London's, keep influence quiet, intelligence, trade, export licenses. Israel's was the sharpest. Western powers might scold in public and shield in private, so long as the regional balance leaned against Arab nationalism and Soviet reach. By 1967, the Cold War ran through every border like a fault line. Egypt armed by Moscow, Israel supplied by Washington and Paris. MI6 and the CIA agreed on one goal: contain NASA, protect the oil routes, and hope the public doesn't look too closely at the cost. A British cable captured the mood in tidy understatement. Israel's deterrent capacity could serve Western interests even when methods appeared excessive. Translation, outcomes over optics. That cable wasn't a warning, it was permission. Inside Israel, pressure built from every direction. The economy slowed, immigration dipped, conscription weighed on families. Religious nationalist activists pushed into what they called the biblical heartland. Scripture converted into survey lines. Elections loomed. A sharp, theatrical victory would quiet the Eshkol is weak chorus and knit a tired public together. The ingredients were ready. They needed a spark. May 1967 provided it. Egypt asked the UN to pull its peacekeepers from Sinai. Uthant agreed within a day. Egyptian forces flowed in. Nasser then closed the Straits of Tiran, Israel's only southern sea route. In Tel Aviv it landed as existential blockade. In Arab capitals, defiant. The families in between, just a headline that was about to decide their lives. Pause a second. 3 pressure points converge. 1. Egypt closes the strait. 2. Israel's economy needs a win. 3. Religious nationalists want the West Bank. Picture 3 tectonic plates grinding together. The friction doesn't cause an earthquake, it creates the conditions where someone can choose to trigger one. That choice has a paper trail. Back to May 28th, the public summary says security discussions. The minutes opened decades later show something else alongside defense: opportunity. Could this crisis finish the territorial project left incomplete in 1948? Begin's words weren't hypothetical musing, not contingency planning, a territorial vision spoken aloud in a government room while Egyptian tanks were still rolling into Sinai. Around the table, security wrapped itself in scripture. Ministers debated how quickly the Jordan Valley could be reached if circumstances compel preemptive measures. The phrasing stayed careful: always conditional, always defensive, but the logistics were concrete. Maps consulted, timelines discussed, the war hadn't started, and the administration of conquered territory was already being sketched. 4 days later, June 1st, Moshe Dayan became defense minister, the eye patch symbol of daring. It mattered because Dayan signaled decisiveness. He could say out loud what others kept between the lines. Within 48 hours, he met the general staff. A declassified summary includes a line that slices through decades of spin. Prepare for territorial administration beyond the Green Line. The Green Line, the 1949 armistice border separating Israel from the West Bank and Gaza. Beyond meant the West Bank and Gaza. Territorial administration meant civilian rule under military authority. That was June 3rd. The war began June 5. The plan existed before the justification. Let that sit. On June 3rd, officials were planning how to govern territories they didn't yet control. Not contingency planning, pre-war administration. Across the ocean, Johnson's team knew a strike was imminent. Readiness signals had been blinking for days. The US, neck deep in Vietnam, and unwilling to fracture ties with a dependable ally, issued only a muted appeal for restraint. Internal memos called Israel a stabilizing regional asset. In London, the phrasing was almost identical. Subtext: a strong Israel served Western interests. Palestinians would pay the price. The silence wasn't confusion, it was consent.
There are some who have urged as a single, simple solution an immediate return to the situation as it was on June the 4th. As our distinguished naval ambassador, Mr. Arthur Goldberg, has already said, this is not a prescription for peace, but for renewed hostilities. So certainly troops must be withdrawn. But there must also be recognized rights of national life, progress in solving the refugee problem, freedom of innocent maritime passage, limitation of the arms race, and respect for political independence and territorial integrity. But who will make this peace where all others have failed for 20 years or more?
Here's what I'm not saying, that Israel had no security concerns. Egypt's build-up was real, the threat felt existential to millions of Israelis. What the documents show is that security and expansion weren't opposites, they were layered. The question isn't whether the threat was real, it's whether the response was designed to do more than neutralize it. Now, the law. Israel called it self-defense. In international law, that claim hangs on imminence, an armed attack underway, or plainly about to be. On the morning of June the 5th, no cross-border invasion of Israel was in progress. Egyptian forces were deployed in Sinai. The first move in the air belonged to Israel. The strike was a choice, timed to secure territory beneath the umbrella of defensive language. By June 10, Israel held Sinai, Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, roughly 3 times its pre-war area, about 70,000 square kilometers, captured in 6 days. 2 narratives were born and still live side by side. In much of the West, a miracle victory, proof of brilliance and providence. In Palestinian life, a Naksa, a setback that never ended. The map flipped, so did the daily realities of millions. Not divine intervention, not purely reactive defense, a blueprint executed, validated in Washington and London, waved through by quiet nods. From here the paperwork takes over, orders, registries, permits. Next up, the emergency regulations that turn 6 days into permanence. We showed you the blueprint, cabinet meetings in May, territorial plans before the war started. We said the law existed before the plan. Now meet that law. Here's where plans leave paper and sit down at the kitchen table. After the guns, the pens went to work. Ink did what artillery couldn't, turning temporary into forever. By the end of 1967, the military commander in the West Bank had already rolled out more than 100 orders reorganizing daily life. Over the decades, that stat climbed well past the 800, governing land, water, movement, speech, planning, residency, even where a tree can be planted. The architecture is intricate, the intent is blunt, separate people from land, then from law, then from each other. Over 1 to 800 military orders in 57 years. That's one new rule every 12 days, on average, for nearly 6 decades. Imagine living under a system where the rulebook gets rewritten twice a month, and you don't vote on any of it, can't challenge it in your own courts, and only learn the change when it's already law. That isn't temporary security, that's a governing philosophy. Start at ground level, title and tenure. Military Order 58, abandoned property, says if you left during the fighting, your home or field can be declared abandoned and handed to a custodian. No automatic compensation, appeals that exist mostly on paper. The clock starts the moment you're on the far side of a bridge. Next to it sits Military Order 59, state property, which lets officials reclassify wide areas as state land, especially if registration doesn't match the format they recognize, or the parcel hasn't been continuously cultivated. Pair them and you get a quiet machine. Leave to save your life. Lose your title. Can't reach your fields under curfew. Lose your fields to state status. Then water. Military Order 92 centralized every well, pump and pipe under a single military authority. Control the aquifers, and you decide where farms shrink and where suburbs bloom. Then planning. Military Order 418 1971 dissolved local Palestinian planning committees and moved zoning power to a higher planning council run by the occupier. That's why one ridge gets paved access, street lights, tidy parcel maps, while the next can't get a permit to add a single room. Same hills, two legal universes. Wrap it in a speech and security net. Military Order 101 1967 criminalized gatherings, flags and leaflets without a permit, so a seminar can be illegal assembly and a poster incitement. Underneath it all, the British mandates 1945 defence emergency regulations, especially Regulation 119, still authorise punitive house demolitions. More recently, Order 1797 created a fast lane for demolishing new structures in Area C with minimal notice. None of this is rumour, it's written down. Now watch policy turn into a Tuesday. A family flees shelling for a week, keys in a pocket, deed in an envelope. When they try to return, the house is abandoned, the orchard state land. Here's one composite from many testimonies. A Hebron shopkeeper leaves with his children, IDs, a land deed, the store lease in his bag. 8 days later, his home is listed with the custodian of abandoned property. He appeals. The answer? The property was unattended and the area under curfew. State control was necessary. Years pass. The storefront reopens under a different license. The paper says abandoned. The family says we locked it. The key still fits. The law doesn't. Here's what I'm not showing you. The security rationale. Officials argue these measures prevent attacks and protect civilians. That argument exists. Courts have heard it. What the documents show is that security and land transfer aren't opposites. They're layered. The question isn't whether threats were real, it's whether the response was designed to do more than neutralize them. Another lever, cultivation. If checkpoints, settler roads, or closed zones keep you from reaching your grove, a rule that looks neutral, uncultivated land reverts to the state, turns a gate and a calendar into a land transfer device. You can see the result on any decent map. Palestinian villages pinched inward, settlement blocks, industrial parks and bypass roads expanding across freshly minted state land. Planning completes the loop. Area C is the 60% of the West Bank that the Oslo Accords left under full Israeli civil and military control. In Area C, Palestinians must seek permits from the same authority that zones them out. Across multi-year windows, approvals hover near statistical zero. UN and Israeli datasets show spans where roughly 1 to 5% of Palestinian applications were approved, while nearby settlement plans sailed through. Families build anyway because life doesn't pause. Then come demolition orders for unauthorized construction. The system manufactures illegality, then punishes it. Picture this, zooming in on a satellite map. 2 legal roads on one hill. On the west shoulder, a settlement with detailed master plans, a new kindergarten built in a season, fresh asphalt right to the roundabout. On the east shoulder, a hamlet where a family adds 2 rooms without a permit because the waiting list is a joke, and a bulldozer arrives at dawn 6 months later. Same sunrise, different law, predictable result. The absentee lever is the hinge that quietly locks doors. Once the custodian takes charge under Order 58, rights peel off like a shadow at noon. Appeals exist, outcomes are rare. It's a catch-22 written into law. Leave to survive, and your absence proves abandonment. Stay, and your lack of permits proves you're illegal. Lay a residency on top. In East Jerusalem, Israel applied its domestic entry law and a center-of-life rule after annexation. Over the years, thousands of Palestinian residents have had permanent residency revoked for failing to prove their lives remained inside the new municipal line. sometimes after study or work abroad. In the rest of the West Bank, population registry freezes and permit regimes split families between permitted and not permitted, turning marriage, reunion, even a hospital visit, into a bureaucratic roll of the dice. International law isn't fuzzy here. Article 49.6 of the Fourth Geneva Convention bars an occupier from transferring its own civilians into occupied territory. The International Court of Justice said as much in 2004 when it examined the wall's route and the settlement enterprise. The baseline isn't murky, the enforcement has been. You'll hear the euphemisms. Disputed, not occupied. Neighbourhoods, not settlements. State land, not confiscated. Euphemisms don't pour concrete or sign demolition orders. Paperwork does. And the paperwork is public, orders, maps, meeting minutes. That's why legal bodies keep circling back to the same conclusion. The regime violates humanitarian law. The counter-argument isn't legal, it's political. It says very calmly that enforcing the law would cost too much. The documents clear the fog. One last picture, a ridge road, wind cutting across the stone. On one side, paved lanes, streetlights, sprinklers misting a traffic island. On the other, a water tank on a roof, a solar panel wired to a car battery, 2 rooms added in cinder block because there's no other way to fit a growing family. Both places share the same horizon, only one of them lives under a military order. That's how displacement becomes permanent. Land reclassified, permits denied, houses demolished, residency revoked, speech policed. Not a mystery, a file, and now the real question. If the system is this intricate, this documented, this visible, why does it persist? Up next, the economic engine that makes occupation profitable, and the international actors who keep it running. The paperwork had a business plan. We just mapped the legal scaffolding, Order 58, Order 92, Order 418. Over 1,800 rules, rewriting life every 12 days for 57 years. Now watch those orders move, not in courtrooms, at kitchen tables, at checkpoints, in the quiet arithmetic of survival. This isn't theory, this is Tuesday morning. Here's the question we're building toward. If bureaucracy can make displacement look like administration, can resistance make survival look like paperwork? Let's start with permits, the maze with no entrance. A farmer in Hebron needs to expand his chicken coop, not at a settlement, not at a suburb. Chickens. He travels 2 hours to Beit El, past 3 checkpoints, through a valley where the road narrows to 1 lane because the bypass is settlers only. At the counter, the clerk says he needs Form 3A, a land survey that costs $800, 2 months of income, and approval from the settlement council next door. He asks why the settlement council gets a vote on his chickens. The clerk slides the form across. Next. 6 months later, after 3 trips, 2 lost work days, the zoning changed while you waited. The parcel is now agricultural reserve. No structures allowed. He builds anyway because his family needs to eat. The demolition order arrives before the roof is finished. Read that again. You need a permit to build. To get a permit, you need a registered address. To register an address, you need a building. The circle has no entry point because it's not supposed to have one. This isn't inefficiency, this is design. So families build anyway, because waiting means never starting. Because illegal appears on paper and hunger appears at the table. Now movement, the calculus everyone learns by heart. A 12-kilometer commute from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. Good day, 15 minutes, Tuesday in March. 4 hours in idling cars. Children asleep in back seats. A diabetic man rationing insulin because he didn't plan for this. Families start to calculate. Leave at 4 a.m. for a 9 o'clock hospital appointment. Miss it, and the next slot is 3 months away. A student in Ramallah keeps 2 sets of textbooks. One at home, one at her aunt's in Nablus. The checkpoint between them closes without warning. She's missed 3 exams in 2 years, not for oversleeping, for a gate that shut at 6 a.m. and opened at noon. This isn't airport security. It's a grandmother who needs permission to visit her daughter 12 kilometers away and sometimes gets it and sometimes doesn't. It's a work permit that lets you labor in Jerusalem but not sleep there, so every night you queue again, no matter how late the shift runs. The system doesn't announce itself with sirens. It just makes you late, makes you miss things. Makes you choose which part of your life you can keep.
on the East Bank, the fact that permits did not always include the entire family, or that fears about returning were still not allayed.
Now, residency, where biography becomes evidence. In East Jerusalem, the center of life rule turns your existence into a file. A medical student studies in Amman 4 years, the length of the program. She returns with a degree and her mother's recipe book, and learns at the Interior Ministry counter that her Jerusalem ID was revoked 18 months ago. Nobody called. The house where she learned to walk still stands. Her name is gone from the registry. On paper, she's a visitor in her birthplace. To prove center of life, you need utility bills, school records, tax receipts. But if you left to study or work, those documents stop accumulating. The rule punishes the mobility it claims to measure. Let the numbers land. Since 1967, more than 14,000 Palestinians have lost Jerusalem residency this way. That's at about 245 people a year. Roughly one person every day and a half, discovering they're no longer allowed to live where they've always lived. Not for a crime, for being away too long, or not proving they stayed enough. A border you can't see, drawn through a living room, a father with Jerusalem ID, a mother with West Bank ID, children who inherit the wrong one and can't live in the house they grew up in. They eat dinner together and sleep in 3 different legal jurisdictions. Step back. The design reads like a flowchart with no good exits. Leave for safety, lose your home to abandonment under Order 58. Stay and farm, lose access when land becomes a closed military zone. Travel for work or study, lose residency for being away too long. Build without a permit, face demolition, wait for a permit, watch your family outgrow the house while the file sits in limbo. Every choice has a cost, every path has a trap. That's not security, that's structure. And here's the cold elegance. The system doesn't need soldiers at every door. It runs on paperwork, it runs on waiting, it runs on quiet exhaustion, on people proving every single day that they have the right to stay where they were born. Meanwhile, maps change quietly. Security zones, closed areas, state land, nature reserves, villages erased from official atlases, replaced by new Hebrew names, roads that don't appear on Palestinian maps, carrying settlement traffic each morning.
Mabsoot, very good. Yes, my heart is very good.
The geography of memory and the geography of administration drifted apart. One was lived, the other legislated, but families kept their own maps, hand-drawn plots where the olives stood before the barrier, photocopied deeds with borders that no longer match official surveys, wedding photos from courtyards now on the wrong side of a fence. These aren't legal documents in the occupier's system. They're legal documents in the system of memory, and memory often outlasts policy.
How do you feel about all this yourself?
Well, I don't think anybody would be pleased from the situation we are living in. How would you feel yourself being a refugee twice in your life? In 20 years.
Not good.
That's how I'm feeling.
Inside the same archives that hold demolition orders, another record endures. Petitions in careful Arabic, letters to military governors, arguing clause by clause, Ottoman-era deeds copied by hand and submitted in triplicate. Families who couldn't afford lawyers became their own researchers, citing the occupier's regulations back at him. Defiance didn't always win, but it made sure the file shows they resisted, in ink as well as in voice. Every petition that cited an order back at its author, every deed in triplicate, every letter that began, according to your own regulation. These weren't just appeals, they were a counter-archive, built one page at a time, proving the people being erased were paying attention, taking notes, refusing to disappear quietly. Zoom out from the cabinet and the picture holds. Bureaucracy did what bullets couldn't. It made a weak feel permanent, but it also created a paper trail, and the displaced became archivists of their own erasure. So here's the next turn. If the system runs on paperwork, what happens when the paperwork starts talking back? Next, we step into courtrooms and committees, where Ottoman deeds meet modern rulings, and a filing cabinet becomes a weapon that cuts both ways. We just watched how orders bite on a Tuesday morning. Now zoom out. The occupation wasn't only local administration, it was notarized at the UN in English, argued in French and Arabic, weighed at The Hague, cushioned by great power policy. On paper there is law, in practice there is power. start with the line everyone cites, UN Security Council Resolution 242. It does two things. First, it affirms a bedrock rule, no acquiring territory by war. Then it calls for withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict. That missing "the" before territories launched decades of hair-splitting. In the equally authoritative French and Arabic, des territoires occupés, min al-aradi al-muhtalla, many jurists hear the definite sense, the occupied territories. Even Dean Rusk, after leaving office as US Secretary of State, acknowledged the phrasing was tactical. The principle against taking land by force was the intent, and then facts on the ground. Within months, settlement began. Kfar Etzion was re-established in September 1967, a signal that temporary was already bending toward permanence. From there, the network grew year by year. By the 2000s, this wasn't a handful of hilltops, it was a demographic system. Today, about 700,000 Israeli civilians live across the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Precision matters, the direction is indisputable. One honest caveat that keeps us straight. In 2005, Israel dismantled its settlements in Gaza under disengagement. That did not end the legal debate over Gaza, but those particular settlements and settlers were removed. Blankets claims like none were ever dismantled are wrong. Accuracy is part of respect. Now, the referees of the law, the International Committee of the Red Cross, has long treated the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and Gaza as occupied territories under the Fourth Geneva Convention. That matters. Occupation law bars an occupier from transferring its civilian population into occupied land and from seizing private property absent imperative necessity and due process. This isn't a fringe view, it's the mainstream humanitarian law reading. In 2004, the World Court weighed in. The International Court of Justice, in an advisory opinion on the route of the separation barrier inside the West Bank, concluded 14-1 that the construction and its associated regime violate international law. Related settlement activity is unlawful. Sections built inside the West Bank should be dismantled with compensation to affected Palestinians. The lone dissenter, American Judge Thomas Buergenthal, objected on procedural grounds, arguing the court lacked a sufficient factual basis. He did not dispute the core legal principles on settlements. The holding stood. 2 decades later, the barrier remains and settlement numbers have climbed. Law on paper, power in practice. Pause here. 14-1, not a split decision. Not. The international community is divided. 14 judges from Brazil, China, Egypt, France, Germany, Japan, Jordan, Madagascar, the Netherlands, Russia, Sierra Leone, the UK, Venezuela, and the US agreed. One procedural objection. The legal consensus was overwhelming, and yet nothing moved. So if the law is that clear, why didn't the system unwind? Part of the answer lives in the Security Council chamber. Since the early 1970s, the United States has cast dozens of vetoes on resolutions critical of settlement expansion or proposing enforcement. Debate motives if you want. Cold War alignments, domestic politics, protect the process diplomacy. The effect is simple, no enforcement. The Council writes the rules of the field, the veto keeps the whistle in the pocket. Occasionally the gap narrows. In December 2016, Resolution 2334 passed 14-0. The United States abstained rather than vetoed. It reaffirmed that settlements have no legal validity and called for distinction in agreements between Israel and settlements.
President Obama and this administration have shown an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security because that is what we believe in. Our commitment to that security has never wavered, and it never will. Even with a financial crisis and budget deficits, we repeatedly increase funding to support Israel's military. And in September, the Obama administration signed a memorandum of understanding to provide $38 billion in security assistance to Israel over the next 10 years, the largest single pledge of military assistance in U.S. history to any country. And as the Israeli Prime Minister himself has noted, our military and intelligence cooperation is unprecedented.
Within weeks, a new U.S. administration signaled the abstention was an anomaly. The settlements didn't stop. But for that brief window, the Council's voice and the law's text aligned. The record shows the gap isn't inevitable, it's chosen. Another part is material. The US-Israel security relationship is formalized in a 10-year memorandum of understanding that, since 2016, locks in $3.8 billion annually in military assistance. For context, it is the largest long-term peacetime military aid package the United States has signed with any country. Whatever you think it should be, it underwrites the security architecture in which the occupation persists. Across the Atlantic, Britain's rhetoric leans peace process. but between 2015 and 2023 UK arms export licenses to Israel totaled over £500 million, according to Campaign Against Arms Trade.
The United Kingdom is a dear and close friend of the State of Israel. We reject all efforts to delegitimise or undermine Israel. The movement for boycotts, divestment and sanctions, rooted as it is in a culture of prejudice and hostility to Israel, is a barrier to peace, and my government will never support any resolution that advances the cause of boycotts or delegitimisation in any way. It is because of our steadfast and stalwart commitment to Israel's security and its existence as the Jewish homeland that we voted for today's resolution. 2017 will not be an easy year for the Israel-Palestine issue, 50 years since the Six-Day War and the subsequent occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and 100 years since my country issued the Balfour Declaration. However, we must all uphold our responsibility, as this Council has finally upheld its responsibility today, in order to deliver the long-term security that Israelis deserve. And the state
committees and watchdogs question compliance. The numbers fluctuate. The through line is continuity. Strategic partnerships outlast headline cycles. Defenders will say, military aid ensures regional stability, protects a democratic ally, and maintains intelligence sharing that benefits Western security. Those are real strategic calculations. They are also choices. Choices that prioritize one set of interests over enforcement of the laws those same governments helped write. The aid isn't neutral, it is the material spine of the status quo. For balance, note a countercurrent. In 2012, the UN General Assembly voted to upgrade Palestine to non-member observer state. 138 in favour, 9 against, 41 abstentions. The United States voted no. It didn't change a single checkpoint, but it formalised a global acknowledgement that a political people exists and has standing, even as enforcement remained absent. While the Council debated Resolution 2334 in December 2016, a farmer in Hebron received his third demolition notice in 4 years. The vote was 14-0. The bulldozer came 3 weeks later anyway. The house had stood since 1982. His children's height marks were on the kitchen wall. The resolution called settlements illegal. The demolition order cited unauthorized construction. Both pieces of paper were real. Only one had a bulldozer behind it. That's the gap. In one Tuesday morning, here's the pattern, without theatrics.
Now, and they start destroying homes after forcing families to leave their homes, taking them out, children, women, men, taking their properties out of their homes and then destroying a home after another. Caves underground have been destroyed, sheep shelters, almost no structure left in the community, just maybe 2 or 3 left, and the demolition is continuing even in the moment we are talking. About 120 people living in this small village, and around 50 structure that they had for the sheep and for homes to live in, and the school, caves, and almost everything is destroyed, just a few left as we said. Since October 7th, Israeli army with the settlers established 3 illegal outposts around this community and now erasing this village to create more and more Israeli illegal settlements in the area.
The texts say one thing: no territory by conquest, protect civilians, dismantle unlawful measures. Institutions often affirm it: ICJ opinions, ICRC positions, General Assembly votes. The enforcement space, Security Council action, and great power policy absorbs the legal signal and releases a political shrug. That's how temporary hardens into normal. That's how an exception turns into a system, and yet the record still matters. Law can be slow, but it is stubborn. When a former Secretary of State admits the ambiguity was tactical, the principle that land can't be taken by war becomes more, not less, legible. When the World Court says 14-1 that a route violates law, it sketches a map the future can still use. When a chamber reads 138-9-41, it isn't enforcement, but it is a ledger entry against forgetting. Paper isn't nothing. It's the part of the story that outlasts all of us. It's why, 50 years from now, when someone asks, did anyone object? The answer won't be silence. It will be, yes, 14 judges, 138 nations, the Red Cross, and a farmer in Hebron with a filing cabinet full of petitions. They objected, they documented, they left a trail. The question isn't whether the law exists. It does. The question is whether power will ever be required to follow it, or whether the gap will simply be called realism until we forget there was supposed to be a difference. From here we step back into kitchens and fields, what it means to study, to farm, to marry, when a person meets a maze disguised as policy. While diplomats debated grammar and judges issued opinions, families were learning a different kind of law, the law of checkpoints, permits and waiting rooms. The law that gets practiced every day. Everything here lives downstream of 6 days in June 1967. The occupation's legal engine didn't just end the fighting, it standardized control, what follows our ordinary lives inside that machine. Where I describe a single person Treat it as a composite drawn from documented testimonies and archives. The patterns are verified, names are blended for privacy and clarity. Started in a living room. After 1967, classrooms could be closed by order, so classes moved home. Picture a cramped apartment in Ramallah. A chalkboard leaned against a bookcase. 20 students sharing floor space. A lecturer rotating addresses each week to avoid raids. Attendance lists weren't written. They were memorized. Exams were whispered. Parents watched the stairwell in shifts. Degrees were delayed, not denied. Universities were shut by military order more than once. Birzeit, for example, endured a 4-year closure from 1988 to 1992. When gates finally opened, students arrived with binders of hand-copied notes, proof that learning hadn't stopped. It had just changed venue.
This is average, normal. Always happens.
Every day. Daily life?
This is daily life here now. With the Intifada, you go out, and there's a demonstration, and they shoot at you with live bullets.
The Palestinians are revolting against occupation. It's a revolt against occupation, against the things that we're suffering, against all the rights that we've lost, against the Israeli occupation. You can't do what you want to do. You're always worried about what's going to happen to you, your family. You don't know whether the next time your brother goes out, you're going to see him again. You don't know what's going to happen. They have the right to do what they want to do, and you have nobody to, to turn to. There's no police they're on your side. There's nobody that's on your side. You're by yourself, and you're surrounded by them. And what they can do is up to them because they're the government. They can do what they want to do, and you sit and suffer. You have to fight back. The people are fighting back with their stones while they're getting shot at with live ammunition.
Are you never afraid?
Well, there's times that you get afraid.
Yeah, you get afraid sometimes, but when you're in a demonstration or something, you're not afraid to fight for what is right. And that's what you have to do. You can't be afraid.
But you can lose your life.
But it's better to lose your life than to live under occupation.
Documents became heirlooms. That first summer normalized searches and reclassification. Families learned to treat paper like treasure. In institutional collections you find careful bundles, Ottoman tapu deeds, Mandate-era tax receipts, Jordanian stamps. Oral history became a second front. By the 1990s, researchers were racing the clock. They recorded elders who could still walk their villages with their eyes closed. A composite from those interviews, an 80-something man from Imwas, west of Jerusalem. He doesn't argue politics, he gives directions. The well is 20 steps from the mosque. The olive press sits east of the square. My house had a blue door. My wife painted it the year we married. Then he does the thing that breaks you. He closes his eyes and walks. Left it at the bakery, up to the cemetery. Third grave in the row under the fig.
I can confirm that. We were sitting with the Mukhtar around midnight when a Jordanian officer named Fawzi came and told us that they were pulling out and we would have to manage for ourselves. The Israelis entered the village as if they were on parade.
Imwas was demolished after the war. In the mid-1970s, the site was planted over as Canada Park, funded by the Canadian Jewish National Fund. But the village survives in recorded memory. Blue door, fig tree, 20 steps to water. Memory doubles as a counter map when the official one deletes you. Symbols hardened into practices. The key, carried since 1948, took on new weight after 1967 when absentee rules were applied to newly occupied areas. The key says, I had a door, I still have a claim.
Dr. Zaid was furious when he discovered that people in his new country, Canada, were collecting money to put a park over villages that neighbored his own, and that those donations were tax deductible.
I was mortified when I read in the Chronicle Herald in 1978 that people in Halifax were being honoured, and I repeat the word honoured, for building Canada Park on the ruins of people's homes in Amwas and vicinity. And I thought, this is appalling, and there was the Premier of Nova Scotia, the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, the Mayor of Halifax participating in this honouring process.
Dr. Zaid carries with him a set of useless keys to a door he will never unlock.
My mother, when they walked out of our house, well, quite innocently, she thought that they're just going to be told to stay out of the village for a few hours or a few days and will be returning back, so she brought the keys to our house with her. But of course, the house doesn't exist anymore, but we still hold the keys for what it's worth.
Maps inside classrooms became contested ground. After annexation moves and residency rules reshaped East Jerusalem, schools sat in the vice of licensing, funding and curricular approvals. In some Israeli atlases, the green line isn't drawn. In many Palestinian classrooms, it's the first line on the board. A teenager studies civics in a municipal textbook that never names occupation. then goes home to a grandmother who points out the window and names it Street by Street. 2 maps in one city aren't confusion, they're policy, and the split traces back to that week. In Ada camp, a giant key of return arches over the road. At home, families polish the smaller keys they kept. Grandparents teach kids to trace the teeth. The file says, "You left, therefore you're gone." The key replies, "I left, therefore I still have this." It doesn't open the lock anymore, it opens the record. On Batir's terraces above the rail line, pickers plan around checkpoint hours. Some seasons you get a 1-week window, then nothing for a month. Uprootings have been documented across decades. According to applied research groups and UN reports, more than 800,000 olive trees were uprooted between 1967 and 2011. Replantings had happened too. Each sapling is a small appeal. Every harvest is a test set. Culture kept the archive open, where administration narrowed speech. Filmmakers like Elia Suleiman and Hani Abu Assad turned daily constraint into public record. Poster collections became a visual index of resistance across decades. None of it claims neutrality, yet it asserts presence. When facts on the ground become entries in a registry, facts in a film become entries in a conscience. There's a bill for this kind of steadfastness. Permits to fix a cracked wall, permits to reach a clinic, status checks to keep residency current. Parents resubmit the same form with a fresh stamp because the first application expired while the office was closed. In the South Hebron Hills and parts of the Jordan Valley, whole communities have rebuilt the same structures more than once. Homes, tin classrooms, livestock shelters.
The attack started with around 10 settlers, but more kept joining. I think by the end there were 40 protected by the army. We were outnumbered, we couldn't defend ourselves.
International activists who come to help are not spared either. This year, Palestinians renewed the call for activists to join their harvest, hoping for some protection and to expose the violence. And that's why Israel is deporting them, they say. Israeli forces accuse 30 activists assisting Palestinian farmers in Burin near Nablus of working in a closed military zone, an accusation the activists deny. For Palestinians, the message is clear. Leave or face further violence.
Every year they come and they burn it or, take it out from the roots. Maybe at least 5 years in row, that's what they did. And finally they took the land and they put their settlers in it.
Olives mean income, but for Palestinians, this isn't just about the trees. It's about the land itself. Despite the beatings, the arson, the threats, many have returned to their groves. Because not harvesting means surrendering their land, and that's exactly what the settlers want.
A roof often decides whether you're counted as present or filed as absent. The cost is time, money, and stress, and the quiet arithmetic of what you can afford to resist this month. Yet the reply keeps arriving in the same tone, calm, stubborn, ordinary. I will stay and I will remain whole. Everything here is present tense, but its grammar was written in 6 days. The forms, the closures, the status categories, the seizures, they're derivatives of that moment. Earlier we traced what disappeared and who prepared the eraser. Here you've heard how erasure is resisted, with living room schools, with deed tins and oral maps, with keys that won't be thrown away, with terraces that keep sending up green. Wars and systems endure. So does a people's memory, because it has become infrastructure.
كان في مشاركة was participation with many forces in Israel against the occupation.
We must shout out loud in the streets from one woman to another.
My sisters, our people face challenges that require us all to unite.
We cannot be free women in a liberated nation, nor can we taste the flavor of freedom in a liberated country if we are not accepted by other groups in society.
6 days redrew lines on a map, the decades after built the system to hold them in place. In this film, we followed how that system moved from law to concrete to economy, until the 1967 framework settled in as an operating system under ordinary life. Along the way, you met composite narratives drawn from testimonies and archives. The patterns are real, the names are blended to protect families. They are here not as symbols of tragedy, but as evidence of persistence, a counter-system built to remember what power tries to erase. What did we actually show? That survival became defiance, that memory became documentation, that endurance became evidence. 6 days of war produced decades of legal, physical, and economic infrastructure. In one breath, emergency became policy, policy became profit, and profit became export a multi-billion-dollar security industry sold to governments and police forces in well over 100 countries. The infrastructure of occupation became a product line. Your government might be a customer. Every system depends on forgetting. Palestinians refuse to forget. That refusal is the hinge between memory and future. When records outlast rhetoric. When documentation outlives denial. Paper is not nothing. Paper is the part of the story that survives us. If this matters to you, I hope it does not stop here. You are now a witness to what you have seen and heard. What you choose to do with that is yours. If you want to help this record travel, you can share it with someone who has been told this is too complicated. You are welcome to leave a comment with the moment that stayed with you, and if you can, support the organizations preserving these testimonies, links below. Before we close, I want to name some of the films whose voices and images you have seen woven through this episode. This documentary stands on the work of people who pointed cameras at Palestine long before this channel existed, and who still do not have anything like the audience they deserve. Canada Park in Palestine is a rare film about how the villages of Imwas, Yalu and Beit Nuba were emptied after 1967 and replanted as a leisure park. If the erased village section of this episode stayed with you, go and sit with that documentary in full. Days of Rage, The Young Palestinians, follows teenagers in the first intifada as they grow up under occupation between school, prison and street politics. It is an unvarnished look at the generation that turned daily humiliation into organised resistance. Israeli settlers burn trees, assault Palestinians in occupied West Bank olive harvest attacks is an Al Jazeera English report that stays with farmers on the hillsides as settlers torch groves and beat harvesters under the eye of armed soldiers. It shows, without filters, what friction looks like when the cameras are actually rolling. The West Bank Was Palestine is a 1989 Norwegian documentary that quietly walks through the West Bank in the late 1980s. Checkpoints, settlements, and ordinary life, at a time when most foreign coverage barely looked past the headlines. It is one of those archives that feels more honest than 1,000 talking points. The Arab refugees from 1968 spends time inside Talbiya camp with Palestinians living the aftermath of the Six-Day War. It is grainy, uncomfortable, and important, a reminder that refugee is not a label from a United Nations file. It is a childhood, a queue, a tent, a lifetime. Naila and the Uprising tells the story of Naila Ayesh and the women's networks that helped lead the first intifada from underground offices, kitchens, and classrooms. If you want to understand how much of this struggle has been carried on women's shoulders, that film is essential. Walking to school with Wade in Hebron follows one boy on his route to class through military checkpoints and settler streets. In 11 minutes, it shows more about what occupation does to a childhood than hours of debate ever could. All of these films are linked below and collected in a playlist. They deserve far more eyes than they have, especially now, as Palestinian archives and channels are quietly disappearing from platforms and search results. Watching, sharing and boosting them is one way to push back against that erasure. Next episode, we trace where this system gets exported, who is buying it, and why it might already be operating in your city. This is Prottayon to certify. Receipts over rhetoric, clarity over noise. We just certified a truth. If it matters to you, help it travel. Keep questioning, stay curious, take care of each other.